It is. You have said, and you said this yesterday. You were on CNBC, and you're so right. And you talk about that this is all about an ideology. See, I think the ideology. I'll be quite honest with you. I think the guy is at his core a Marxist. But it's all about ideology. It's not about what the people want. Obviously, it's not about what's good for the country or jobs, because everything in this bill and everything he does is anti-job and anti-growth. So he's ideologically driven like no other president I've ever seen.
There's no question about that. He is the most ideologically driven president that I've ever seen. And I worked for Ronald Reagan, who, of course, was a conservative, but also balanced practicality against, what to do and how to do it and when to accomplish it. Basically, this is a march toward much bigger government control of everything they can get away with. This would have been a socialized medicine program if they had had their way completely. So they couldn't get it completely, so they got themselves halfway to three-quarters of the way there. The worst part of it is this is an enormously expensive bill that is going to add on to our deficit in ways that we haven't even figured out yet.
Yeah.
There's never been a year that I can think of where Medicare and Medicaid didn't increase in expenditures. And to think that this president, who has been unable to save money on anything, who has spent more money than any president in history in a short period of time, is going to save money on Medicare and Medicaid is just a cruel joke.
I like to call it a crock of Barack.
Well, it's just the things they say are so patently absurd. They're going to cover 30 million people. They're going to require insurance companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions, which may be a good idea, but don't tell me it's not going to cost an enormous amount of money.
It's going to cost an enormous amount of money. By the way, they're going around selling this and talking about all the wonderful things in it. The pre-existing condition kicks in for kids immediately, but it does not kick in for adults until 4 years from now.
Well, a lot of this doesn't kick in until 4 to 6 to 8 years from now, which means that where was the crisis in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, the Obama was selling this on people are dying, in the streets because they don't have health care.
Right, 40.
They're going to be dying for 4 or 6 more years.
Right, 40-something thousand a year we're now told die every year because they couldn't get health insurance.
They're going to die for next year, the year after, the year after.
Absolutely, but my point also in bringing that up was, and you touched on the insurance companies, and while it's a great idea, of course, everything they're doing is designed to put these insurance companies out of business. I mean, if you tell insurance companies that there's no limit on what you could pay anymore, that you can't raise the premiums the way you want anymore, and you got to give insurance to sick people, it's like saying to insurance companies that give to drivers, people who have accidents every second day, you have to insure them. You can't penalize them. You can't charge them more. That company's going to go out of business.
It's going to go out of business, absolutely. Or until they start regulating premiums, and I'm not sure exactly when that kicks in. That kicks in a few years. Insurance companies will just raise the premiums on other people.
Yeah.
And on you and me. So maybe we want it, maybe we don't want it. But the most offensive thing about this is the president and his administration telling us this is not going to cost money. It's going to cost an enormous amount of money.
We're talking to former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, actually Mayor Rudy Giuliani, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Let me ask you about the word jobs. After Scott Brown was elected, the president went out, first of all, blamed the election on dissatisfaction with 8 years of Bush, and then talked about how I've always been about jobs. And he hasn't mentioned the word jobs once in the last 3 weeks, and he's not going to mention it this week either.
Well, it's not, because this is going to cost us jobs. It already has. I mean, Caterpillar announced last week it's going to cost them $100 million more to implement this. $100 million more means they're going to have to cut workers. They're going to have to take workers they have, work them overtime so that they don't have to incur the legacy costs that are now becoming enormous. This will have a very significant effect on reducing jobs, not creating jobs. And when he talks about even creating jobs, Steve, he's talking about creating government jobs.
Right.
This guy doesn't create private jobs.
No, and
if you look at even that stimulus thing where they claim they saved this many jobs and that many jobs, these were all government jobs they were talking about, which means that we pay the taxes to pay the salaries of the people that are on the government jobs. So it's not like a net add to the economy.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. There's so much I want to talk to you. I want you to hear this, though. There's already legal challenges. I think Virginia and Florida, the first two states to sue over the constitutionality of the health care bill. You, of course, as the number 3 man in the Justice Department, a former federal prosecutor. I want you to hear from the House Judiciary Committee Chairman John Conyers when asked about the constitutionality of the health care bill. mandating that people buy health insurance. This would be cut 5.
Under several clauses, the good and welfare clause, and a couple others. All the scholars, constitutional scholars that I know, I'm chairman of Judiciary Committee, as you know, they all say that there's nothing unconstitutional in this bill. And if there were, I would have tried to correct it if I thought that there were.
Mr. Mayor, the good and welfare clause in the Constitution.
Well, I guess, that must be a different translation of the Constitution, the one that I read.
It must be the Soviet or Cuban
the
Constitution.
Good and welfare clause. Well, I'd like to argue that case. If he's going to argue that it's defensible under the good and welfare clause, I'd like to ask the judge to go find the good and welfare clause in the Constitution.
Oh, my God.
I mean, the reality is, this is a good constitutional argument because what they're really going to rely on in defending it, the Democrats, they're going to rely on the Commerce Clause, that it affects interstate commerce. This is a strange argument to make when you cannot buy health insurance outside your own state.
Right.
You are restricted, which by the way, is one of the reforms that should have happened. And when they keep talking about Republicans just say no, Republicans don't just say no. Republicans say, how about letting us buy insurance in all 50 states so we drive the price down? How about reducing the cost of medical malpractice insurance and reducing the cost of legal judgments? How about giving us a tax deduction of $10,000 or $15,000 so we can buy our own health insurance, create a bigger private market? That'll really drive the cost down.
Sure.
So I think what we should be doing as Republicans is not just talking about repealing this bill, but about substituting a new law that we would get a chance to pass if we could win the House or Senate.
Right. Well, I agree with you. Now,
and then, I think this is a great political argument. It's not that they keep accusing us of being the party of no. Meanwhile, they don't allow us to introduce any legislation. So Nancy Pelosi has cut off every attempt Republicans have made to introduce the things that I'm talking about. And if we had control of the House, even just a House, you could introduce comprehensive health care reform that actually save money.
Yeah,
and then force these Democrats in the Senate to vote for it, force the president to veto it, and then we'd have
something to run on.
Set up for the 2012 election.
Absolutely. I got one more for you. Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting with Obama tonight. Boy, would I like to be a fly on the wall.
I think it is, if I'm correct, that they're not going to allow cameras.
Oh, I don't know. That could be. I wouldn't be surprised.
I heard this. I'm not sure.
Well, that's how transparency works, Mr. Mayor.
I don't get this. I mean, I would think that that would be. I mean, Israel is one of our closest friends and allies, and whether this administration has a dispute over 1,500 settlers or not, I mean, a meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel should be open. The cameras should be there. They should take joint questions. And what he's doing with Israel is, this really troubles me. And I think the only reason it hasn't gotten more attention is because this health care thing is kind of taking up all the air right now.
And Netanyahu, of course, last night at APEC, I was very proud when he said, Jerusalem is not a settlement.
Yeah, I mean, Jerusalem is the capital of the state of Israel. This would be like telling us that we couldn't, settle people in various parts of Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
I mean, it is the singular and unified capital of the state of Israel. There is a law that no president has enforced yet, which they should have,
to move the embassy to Jerusalem.
The embassy to Jerusalem, which when I was running for president, I said I would do the first day I was elected. We should do it because do you know why? Another reason we should do it and we should allow settlements, because we should create leverage. The only way you win negotiations is by leverage. We should create more obstacles that the Palestinians and the people on the other side have to negotiate.
But here again comes political agenda, Mr. Mayor. When you want the Palestinians to win, why would you give Israel leverage? And I'm afraid that that's the case with this guy.
I used to complain during the Clinton era that he was creating a moral equivalent between the state of Israel and the Palestinian Authority, which was unacceptable. I believe this guy is actually appearing as if the Palestinian Authority, from his point of view, has to create a moral claim.
Yeah, it's very
which,
very
of course,
scary.
makes no sense since they are a corrupt dictatorship, basically. And they're struggling in at least one part of the Palestinian Authority to straighten things out, but they haven't straightened them out yet.
Mr. Mayor, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Rudy Giuliani, ladies and gentlemen.